Right, so thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to our Life After Professional Football webinar with Richard Lee. Obviously, be different from everyone else, but to my left is Rob Lovesey with the Sporting Connect background from Sporting Connect, and to our right is Richard Lee, former Watford and Brentford FC goalkeeper, and other teams too, but I won't list them all. But mainly Watford and Brentford, as it says in his Twitter, Hornet at a B. So I'll hand over to those in a few minutes, but just some housekeeping. If you want to submit a question to Rich throughout the whole webinar, there is a show conversation tab along the bottom of your tab on Teams. You just click that and write in your question, and I will we'll get those answered to Richard. Sorry if we don't have time, because there is some questions that came in beforehand, but we will get to those if we can. But just keep your mics and your video off, as I said in the emails. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Rob and we'll get started. So thank you very much.
Nice one. Cheers, Marcus. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Obviously, this is the fourth in the series now of these short videos we're doing for the Surrey FA. Pleasure to have Rich with us today. I know Rich fairly well, so we've got quite a detailed agenda we're going to fly through and cover quite a lot, looking at life, after professional football and how Rich prepared. But also, obviously, Rich, I know you got a real vested interest in business side of things as well, real passion there. You've worked on some really good ventures, including Sporting Connect. So you're a fellow partner in Sporting Connect with myself, and I've been lucky enough to work with you and learn from some of your insight to try and over the last 10 years of getting Sporting Connect to where we are now, partnering with the Surrey FA. But let's kick things off. Let's hear a bit about your journey, how you got into football, life as a professional, and then what you're doing now. Over to you.
Yeah, no, certainly. In terms of how I got into football, I think like most kids, it was a case of fell into the position to an extent. Wasn't that I set out to be a goalkeeper, soon fell in love with it, and thankfully things progressed pretty well. I think in terms of the transition from playing to going into the business world, I suppose to an extent it was from my dad, but it was also the realization that during my career playing alongside some of the people I played with, a lot of the things that I learned, where football kind of teaches you so many lessons, I found in terms of your disciplined approach, being strategic in a lot of what you do, I was able to kind of move that across. But I think what I've ended up doing now, and I made loads and loads of mistakes, which I'm sure I'll touch on in this webinar, but is utilising the fact that I had an okay career. I wouldn't say it was a fantastic career, but I had an okay career, which has kind of given me a bit of a grounding in order to then build on. So I've still very much stayed in the world of football. Everything that I do now has been maybe utilising a lot of the networking I did when I played, and now trying to put that into practice with a lot of the things I do. So at the moment, I'm involved in a football agency. So we represent, for me, a lot of goalkeepers, and I've focused and really used that as my niche. So I represent a lot of goalkeepers, including Premier League goalkeepers, Championship goalkeepers. I've then got goalkeeper schools. We've got a lot in the UK now, a few in other countries as well. We've got a few outfield schools as well. And then a lot of online content, so podcasts. We produce, a lot of goalkeeping workouts, mindset sessions, goalkeeping classrooms. So just really kind of honing in on what I think my niche was, utilising a lot of what I had during my career, and then trying to hopefully make the most of life after football and still get the enjoyment that I got from football.
Yeah, so Rich, at what point in your career did you start to think about these sort of business ventures after? Was it something that came to you midway through? Were you advised, or was it just always in the back of your mind?
Do you know what? I started early, and I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend that to other footballers. And I know that sounds a bit bizarre, because we always talk about, now when you're playing, you need to consider your career afterwards. But I mean, look, for top level professionals now, the truth is that the amount of money they earn is more than most small businesses. So actually, my argument now would be, while you're in the height of your career, really focus everything you can on your career. How can you maximize what your output is as a footballer? Because if you earn that big contract, you earn that Championship contract, you earn that Premier League contract, you could set yourself up financially for life. So I think the best investment you can do while you play is concentrate on your game. So if I had my time again, I wouldn't have got into business as early as I did. However, my dad was a bit of an entrepreneur. He did very, very well for himself. And that kind of got me interested. That, I suppose, was the spark. And then I went on Dragon's Den when I was 23. So I was quite young, 23, 24. We got an investment from one of the Dragons. Again, that then gave me a bit of a name as an entrepreneur as well. And I think that then helped me, although I won't necessarily go into depth on that investment because it never actually took place. But although that didn't necessarily have the outcome that I wanted, it gave me a little bit of a standing to then maybe speak to other people, because I was kind of known for that. And I think then being seen as a bit of an entrepreneur, having had some success with a couple of different businesses, it was then easier to open a few doors. So although the Dragon's Den experience wasn't necessarily the most positive experience I've had, it did serve a bit of a positive purpose. And then pretty much since then, so since sort of 22, I set up the goalkeeping schools, and then set up the agency when I was retiring. I had the cat business, which was the Dragon's Den business, while I was playing as well. So I was spinning a few plates, which in hindsight, when I got to 27, 28, it was a little bit overwhelming, because I was still trying to have a good career as well as focusing on different businesses. And I did stretch myself a little bit too thin. So I certainly learned a lot of lessons. I wouldn't advise people to do what I did, but now that I have gone through that, I feel like I'm in quite a good place to give advice on it.
That must have been a hell of a lot then, concentrating on playing, because obviously you're playing Premier League with Watford. You're spinning different plates with these different businesses as well at the age of 23. Did you find, was it quite nice to have those businesses as a bit of to escape from the football world?
Yes and no. So this is where it was when it was good, but then at the same time, it could be quite stressful in that I'll be finishing. For instance, I used to do that quite often. I'd get to the training ground early, and then I was back in the old school days with the BlackBerry. I'd be getting the BlackBerry out, and I'd spend an hour emailing or sending BBMs or whatever it was. That, so I kind of felt like and then I would switch on and do my football. So I'd do my training, but then as soon as I finished, I was back on the emails. I was then going and packing up gloves to send out in the afternoons, which in hindsight, really, it probably wasn't the best way that I could have spent my time. But that was my way that's what I like to do alongside football, whereas others might be playing computer games or going shopping. For me, I quite like using my mind in that way. In hindsight, I probably took on a bit too much. That's all I'd say. I think my advice now to a lot of lads would be, for instance, if you're a League One, League Two player or a non-league player, then by all means, whatever you do in terms of training, but you might want to have, say, a goalkeeping school on the side, especially if you are a good goalkeeper, then you might want to do that because it fits in nicely. You know it very, very well. You know the position. You'll be able to be very successful in that. It can be a lovely little income to supplement whatever you are doing, certainly if you're a League One, League Two goalkeeper. So that would then make sense. But I wouldn't then say go and have a fleet of goalkeeping schools, because I think you can soon then lose focus on what is your main passion.
Did your coaches know about the different businesses you were juggling?
Do you know what? They did. And in hindsight, I was probably a bit naive, because I remember having a chat with Malky Mackay when he was Watford manager. And he was a bit funny about it. And I could never understand. I kind of at the time thought, well, it doesn't affect me. I'm playing and I'm doing my bits on the side. That's my free time. Why does it matter? Now I look at it from his perspective. If you're the manager of a football club, you want every one of your players to be 100% focused on performing for the team. So I can see now why he maybe looked at that a little bit negatively. But at the time, I was just completely naive, and I was quite open. I was putting out on Twitter, putting out on all the different social medias to all the different ventures I had going on, thinking that it'd be seen as a real positive. But of course, this is where I think as you get older and you get a bit wiser, you realize that in certain situations, you have to be a certain type of person. So I give this a lot of advice to the lads I work with now, is that I call it playing the game. Like, the managers want to see you as a certain person. They want to see that you're in the gym doing the work. They want to see that you are fully dedicated to what it is that you're doing. Now, I'm not saying that you fake it necessarily, because I think you should do these things, but also understand if you know what they want from you, then you know what the roadmap is. So it's quite a nice thing that whether it's football or any other business, if you know what's expected of you, then it gives you a much better chance of succeeding at that particular thing. So a lot of the advice now I give to the goalkeepers I work with is, certainly while you're in the game, give it everything. When you know that the end is coming close, then at that point you'll have time. You'll have time to do that transition, hopefully, unless it's a career-ending injury and it happens all of a sudden, which is horrible when it does. But again, you can be protected on that with injury insurance. But if it's not all of a sudden, you might know within a year, 2 years that you're coming to the end. At that point, you have got time then to start to set yourself up. But again, I think in hindsight, I probably started a little bit too early. But I say that, and now I'm in a position that I'm really thankful for. It still was horrible. The first 2 years after retiring, I found really difficult. And I know the stats are, divorce, depression, or bankruptcy. You get one of those three. That's kind of the standard. 80 or 90% get one of those three. Fortunately, I managed to only just avoided bankruptcy. But I just about avoided those three. But still, the 2 years straight after football were really, really difficult, because you go from this structured, strict life that you live to suddenly waking up thinking, what am I going to do in my day? And it's a very, very strange feeling.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you say, the balance of, we have a range of coaches that listen to these webinars, different levels. But I suppose they've got their focus on getting the best out of that individual as a player for their club. But then you've also got that moral responsibility in terms of making sure they're prepared for the future for when they leave. So by focusing purely on the football, okay, it gives them the best chance to, to earn what they can and progress through the leagues and have be financially secure. But where does that balance sit in terms of making sure they do spend enough time preparing for the future and life after the game?
Do you know what? No, and it's such a tough question because there has to be an element of reality. I do get that. For instance, if I've got a 15-year-old goalkeeper that's saying to me, like, all I want to do in life is be a professional goalkeeper, but I'm looking and they're 5'4" and they're not going to grow. Well, there has to be an element of reality, and there has to be maybe an element of tough love, which is, look, if that's absolutely your dream, then by all means go for it. But understand that if you're not going to be above 5'4", then it's going to be very difficult. Not necessarily you're not going to be good enough, but because managers will maybe say they have to be 6 foot. So therefore, it's not your fault, but you're not going to have a chance to get to that level. Now, at that point, it might be a case that you then focus on something else, in order to be able to be an expert in something else. But I think it is such a fine line because, it almost goes against the advice you would give. But I guess I come back to the idea of, would you regret it if you did something different? So if your absolute dream was to make it to the Premier League, now at the age of 40, let's say that you made it to League One, but it was because you look back and you spent half your time focusing on business, half your time focusing on football. And then you think, do you know what, if I only had given myself 100%, would I have made it? Would you then have regrets? And I suppose that's the point, is that you don't want to finish your career having had regrets if that is your absolute passion, your absolute dream. So I just think you kind of play all out until you get to the point where you can't anymore, or you don't want to, or you have a change of heart. I guess I go back to that. I just hate the idea that someone finishes their career with a regret or two because maybe they could have given a little bit more. But at some point, that transition does happen. And then what I would say for the lads that I'm working with now that are coming towards retirement, the moment that happens, take your time off, do whatever you do as part of that transition. But then you can always invest yourself 100% into your next pursuit as well. And you can be just as passionate about something else. It might not give you the highs that playing football would, but at the same time, you can be excellent at something else and you can fully dedicate yourself to that. And hopefully, if you've done well enough from football, that might buy you a bit of time in terms of financially. It might buy you a year or two, maybe.
Have you seen over the years when you were playing that the support for life, progression for life after football, has that improved even in the short space of time you were playing?
Yeah, I mean, the PFA have always been, I utilised the PFA. So I did a degree in media. I did a couple of qualifications in neurolinguistic programming, which they covered, which was great. In hindsight, they're very good. I don't think the lads utilise it maybe as much as they should. I think there's a couple of entities out there now. I know Robbie Simpson's got one. I think Life After Professional Sport or something, which I think is gaining a bit of traction. I think there's a few bits out there, but I think there still could be more, like anything. And I think a lot of that then comes round to the support systems that everybody has in place. So I tend to offer that to the lads that I work with because it's something that I've been through and I know that it's going to come to all of them. And there's ideas that I have that I think I can help them with that could be simple ideas that might just generate a small amount of income compared to what they're currently on, but something that could be really, really valuable as soon as they do make the transition. I use goalkeepers as an example because for me, it's a no-brainer. If you're a League One, League Two, National League goalkeeper, it's a no-brainer to have a goalkeeping school locally. Providing the club are okay with it, have a goalkeeper school locally because you are a big name in that local area. And there's no reason you can't have a really successful goalkeeper school running that maybe you hire a coach, very simple business to operate, but it might bring you in an extra £1,000 a month, which might not mean a lot when you're playing professional football, but as I certainly know, as soon as you come out of that environment, you'll be so thankful for that extra little bit of money coming in each month.
On that, in terms of goalkeeper coaching and putting my business head on, so I'm seeing that as a bit of a niche. The fact that by being, goalkeeping franchise, for example, there's only a limited number of goalkeepers. So if you're thinking business and you want to grow, have you're in a unique position where you launched GK Icon, and obviously I've followed that journey of yours, and it's been, quite a journey to get where you are now. So I wonder if you can maybe share some of the insight, because we have a lot of coaches that are maybe thinking about starting their own franchise or academy, and how the challenges you faced and what you'd recommend, any advice you'd pass on.
Yeah, I mean, I could go quite in depth in this, and that it's in theory, it's easy to, not easy, but you'd think it'd be easy to launch a goalkeeper school or a football school. And I'll run through it very, very quickly as to why we've had success. We didn't initially, by the way. In fact, we did initially because it was me and Watford. And of course, being the Watford goalkeeper, we had loads of kids come down. But the numbers soon faded because the local goalkeeper, the local pro goalkeeper is only going to carry you so far. It then needs to be the coaching. Obviously, it needs to be the equipment you use, the pitch you use. Everything needs to be spot on. Also, the strategy that you use. So, again, I don't mind sharing this. We've got a very simple strategy, which is we operate 50 weeks of the year, 1 hour a week. We do a standing order every month. And it's just a very firm strategy. So it's like, right, this is exactly what we do. Every single place we go, pick up, put down. Okay, we find a venue, we find the right pitch cost, we find the right coach at the right price. We market it in such a way where we utilize Twitter, Facebook, sending thousands of messages to parents, to goalkeepers, obviously being careful with, what's it called, GDP or whatever it's called.
GDPR.
You know, that's the one, close enough. Yeah, I think I've gone gross national profit. I think I've gone. No, but we obviously careful with all that as well. But, you know, we basically just utilize whatever we can to then make sure that we do a massive launch night. And then on the launch night, everyone has loads of fun. And then you offer X number of spaces and hopefully you sell out on the first night. Now, we've done that over and over and over. And we've been successful. But it took us 10 years to develop that strategy. It took us 10 years of doing 6-week courses and then getting to the end of 6 weeks and having to sell again to all 30 kids or whatever, which then is a lot of hassle. And then you get a few people drop off and then the weather's not so nice the next couple of weeks. So then people don't sign up and so on and so forth. So you want to simplify what you do. You want to make it as effective as you can and something that has the potential to grow. But it's taken us 10 years, well, more than that now, 13 years to get to the point we are now. I still wouldn't say we've absolutely nailed it, but we have continued to grow and have continued to refine the process.
So 13 years. So that persistence, that determination to carry on, is that a trait? Because this is one of my questions, actually. Are there similar traits that stand out from being a footballer and a professional footballer, which have seen you to bring across into the business world that have helped
100%.
with potential success?
100%. And at times I should have quit. Probably the same
Really?
football as well. But yeah, no, at times I should have quit because I think that was born out of passion. It wasn't necessarily initially a great business idea initially. So again, where I've made mistakes was I then launched in Watford. We had big numbers. So me being me, wanted to run before I could walk. Then I just decided to open 22 within the space of weeks. So I found 22 venues, 22 coaches, and boom, we just opened one night. And it was, the numbers were dreadful, you know, because we hadn't marketed them, but it was just the thinking it was too easy, which again is the same with anything. It's kind of, you know, there's so many people that are out there with these get rich quick schemes, and we all think that the next thing's going to be the big thing and it will just happen. The truth is, and obviously you know this is Sporting Connect, it's the hard yards, it's sticking in there, it's continually finding new avenues, it's refining the process over and over, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes, going again, making more mistakes, learning again. And before you know it, you look back like I do now, I look back and it's actually, although we've made thousands of mistakes, we're in a pretty good position now. So, and actually the experience that I've got now, that's the bit that no one can take away. So, you know, look, it's sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you nail it with the first thing you do, the first business you try, the first venture you try, and it booms, it explodes. And do you know what? If that happens, then great. It might be that it bites you further down the line because you haven't learned some of the hard lessons. Maybe, maybe not. You know, I think for me, I actually made so many mistakes. And this is, I don't mind sharing this. It took me 9 years before I made a profit with a business. Now, touch wood, I've got several that are doing very well now, but it took me a long time because my strategies weren't right. I was maybe too nice in certain situations. I made bad decisions. I led with emotion in other situations, not based on fact. And there was a lot of different things that I've certainly learned now, but maybe I needed to go through that process, either that or having someone good alongside me. And my dad was great, but his businesses were very, very different to the projects that I've got into. So as much as he could give me advice, it was a completely different world back then and a completely different world in what he's involved in as to what I'm doing. So a lot of what we've had to learn, we've had to do, the team that I work with now. And again, we're learning every day.
That's interesting because you mentioned your dad again. He comes up. I've been lucky enough to meet Peter. He's a great bloke, and so is there a reason you've gone down other avenues in terms of businesses that aren't related? Is it a point to prove in terms of, you know what, I could? Is there a bit of competition there? Because
massive, yeah, massive competition. No, I think, do you know what? It's kind of, I think looking now, and this was subconscious when I was younger, but subconsciously you want to make your dad proud. I think a lot of people have that. You want to make your parents proud, and I certainly had that as a kid. I think when I started playing in goal, I soon realised that he was quite proud of me doing so. I joined Watford at the age of 11, and he came to every single game I played, and that means something, you know. And then naturally there is a bit of competition. When I'm younger, I'm playing basketball against him, and I could never beat him. Then one day I beat him. Then tennis. Then, in fact, the last thing was chess. I could never beat him at chess, and I finally, a few years ago, got the better of him at that. So it was kind of just a natural kind of competition that we had. I think then when it came to business, there was a part of me that I didn't want to be that guy. And there's nothing wrong with it, because, by the way, I could take on his business and grow it even bigger, and that could be great. But I just thought that actually I want to do something for myself, just being the person I am. The football route, you know, they really helped me with my parents massively, but that was something that I wanted to make a name for myself. And then post football, it's the same thing. I've got a real passion for building something. So, you know, the agency stuff I love, because I'm working with professional goalkeepers every day. I'm having countless conversations with professional goalkeeper coaches. So it's the kind of people I want to be talking to, because we speak the same language. We've got the same passion. Again, I keep using that word, but we've got the same passion. So because of that, I'm having really interesting conversations every day, which makes me feel good. The other bits we're doing with the goalkeeper schools, you know, we do the stuff online, and again, I'm offering advice to young goalkeepers, and I can see it's making a difference. Again, that helps fulfill a different need in me, I think. So because of that, I've never really wanted to do as much as my dad does distribution now. So he distributes baseball caps, gets them ordered in and sends them out to different shops. Look, it does brilliantly well. Is it something that would give me a buzz? Not really. Financially, it'd probably make sense, but I want something that's going to make me feel really good every day.
So, yeah, preparing players, no matter what level they're looking at, the key that stands out for you is having that passion as well. Because I guess when you're passionate about it, it will drive you on, and it'll make you more resilient, I guess, to continue and persist and make it work.
100%. I think that, do you know what the example I'll give? And I'll say this about the lads I recommend in terms of who's playing. I don't mind mentioning a couple of names. Someone like Dylan Phillips is one of the lads I work with at the moment. Adam Davies had a great game the other day for Stoke.
Oh, yeah. Well, as a Brentford fan, you don't have to talk about Adam Davies.
I know. It was
a great save.
Feeling. It's a weird feeling. I'm desperate for Brentford to win, but then my client makes a fantastic save last minute, which will probably or possibly give him the opportunity to be number one. So it's a very strange. But that's it. Like, so then afterwards, although that was slightly odd, but afterwards I'm speaking to Dylan's just won Player of the Year today. You know, so I'm really fortunate. All the lads I'm working with all seem to win Player of the Year. So I'm kind of speaking to him today, and he's absolutely buzzing. And we've worked so closely over the year. You know, when I was able to, I'm going to all the games that I possibly can to watch him, and I feel it. I feel like I'm working with you. I feel partly responsible for what's going on, good and bad, by the way. So when Dylan lets in a goal in the League One playoff final last year that rolls under his foot and goes in the net, I feel just as bad as he does. So again, I think having that kind of connection with what you're doing is, I appreciate it's not always possible, but I'm really thankful and grateful for that. But the example I would give would be, for instance, with these lads I work with, it's like, right, if you have a choice of going to X club on 10 grand a week to be a number 3, or that club on 5 grand a week to be a number 1, now, as much as the 10 grand a week financially makes a lot more sense, I would paint the picture for them. Well, look, you're going to be a number 3. You're going to be sat in the stands. You're going to get no real buzz from what you're doing. You're going to travel around the country, sitting on the team coach, staying in hotels, never actually playing. Or you can be the number 1 at a similar size club, and you're going to be the main man. They're going to be singing your name every weekend. You're the one that's making match-winning saves. You're the one that's feeling that pressure every time you play a game. It's up to you. Look, if you're financially, if that's your number 1 priority, then absolutely go and take that 10 grand a week contract. If it's not, and you want to look back on your career and talk about those great days that you had where you were so nervous, so pumped up, so excited, well, then that's the option. Like, forget the money, because that's the option. And actually, that situation might lead to an even better situation down the line, because you're going to love what you do that much more. Yeah, you might get a 2-year contract on that money there, but that'll soon go, and you'll soon sign for a club down there and maybe wished that you'd gone to that bigger club and played every week.
So I suppose this, again, resonates with myself as a Brentford fan, because obviously, talking business as well of yourself, you were part of the generation that probably first experienced the Moneyball approach that Brentford were trying to work towards. And obviously now it's, well, very close to reaping its rewards. Who knows, come Wednesday or come the playoffs, we shall see. But that must have been from someone having an interest in business, being around the club at that time. When you joined Brentford, were you brought in, and was that model around, or was it something that evolved whilst you were there? And what was the response from the players around you to the culture that was changing? Did you buy into it? Did you see it progressing to where it is now?
Yeah, no, I bought into it massively. It was just happening. So I don't think I was necessarily recruited using that model because it was still just before. But Matt Benham had just taken over, and then getting to know him and speaking to him, everything was based on facts. Everything was based on mathematics. And the more that he explained different situations to me, it does make sense. Like if you consider that a game of football, that wherever you're shooting from the field, there is an odds percentage as to whether you're going to score or not. So as an example, and this will happen, by the way. So the classic one we see all the time, the ball breaks 40 yards out, the big centre back comes and smashes it 40 yards over the bar, and the crowd give it, oh, unlucky, unlucky. Well, that will stop because the percentage chance of him scoring from 40 yards out is 1 in 1,000. Well, if he could have found a way to slide the ball into a zone, which is 25 yards out, and they shot from there, well, now the odds decrease to 1 in 30. So, of course, would you rather have 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 30? 1 in 30. So, all of a sudden now football is becoming more structured. Now, some don't like this because it is becoming a bit more robotic in that, like American football, you'd have set plays and every player knows those set plays. Well, surely that makes sense. You would do a similar thing with football. You would have set routines that you would follow to try and mix up play and try and find a way of getting the ball, manipulating the ball into certain areas to know that you're giving yourself a 1 in 10 chance of scoring rather than a 1 in 100. And this is where like the expected goals models has come in. And Matt's been doing this for years, doing it for years and years. And he's not signing players based on reputation. I mean, I'm blue in the face today because I've been talking so much about De Gea from last night. And of course, we're talking about reputation on one hand in terms of what he was. We're talking about his current position in terms of the mistakes he's making at the moment. We're also talking about the fact there's a bit of a negative cloud. So then people are actually looking for mistakes. Some people blaming him for all 3 goals yesterday, but that's based on the fact that there is this negative cloud. So there's so much that's going on where a lot of it's based on emotion. A lot of it's based on opinion as opposed to facts. Now, Matt Benham, he only works in facts. So because of that, he won't sign a player based on a reputation or an opinion. He will do it based on hard facts, hard statistics. And because of that, he's built what he's built. 2nd division to top of the championship now, you can't question it. The only problem he's got is that there are a lot of other people catching him up. So he's been able to do it on a shoestring to this point, which is why I really hope for Brentford's sake they do it this season. Because if they don't, there's so many teams now that are catching them up that do have a similar mindset. He's very much a pioneer. If they don't do it this season, again, you'll likely see 3 or 4 Brentford players leaving the summer for a lot of money. But it's a very profitable business, makes a lot of sense. But of course, there'll be other teams that are catching them up again next season if they're still in the Championship.
Yeah, and where do you find those replacements? Because, like you say, the more clubs that are doing it, the smaller pool of players you can draw upon. Any clubs that stand out for you that are starting to adapt this model to keep an eye out for?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do a bit of consultancy at Bristol City, and that's certainly one club that do. And the thing is now there's so many companies out there. People will have heard of Opta is a good one. StatsBomb's another. There's so many out there now. Matt Benham's got his own model, I believe. But because there's so many out there that are doing it and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's so much more you can do in terms of crunching the data and finding what it is that you're looking for. And this is where, and you can literally look worldwide because a lot of these companies now, they've got thousands of leagues around the world. You know, I know one StatsBomb in particular, I think it might be the 75 top leagues around the world. That's all you need. You're talking 25, 30,000 players that are on this system. So instantly, if you're looking for a defensive midfielder who's got the ability to break the lines and slide it into the number 10 over and over and over, and has this sort of athleticism, this maximum speed, covers this much distance in a game, well, you quickly do a few different things on the computer. It gives you a hit list of 12 players you've never heard of in your life. At that point, you then go on a Y-Scout, which is a platform that shows you all the footage. You then look at these 12 players, get a video on each of them, see if you like them. You maybe whittle that down to 3, send your scouts out to go and watch those 3 players. And before you know it, you haven't heard of a player one day. Within 2 days, you're watching them live and you've found someone that nobody else knows about. And this is what a lot of the clubs are doing now. And it's such an interesting model as far as I'm concerned. And this is where you pluck those gems out of nowhere that no one's heard of.
Have you had any of those gems that when you obviously were at Brentford, people turned up and, you know, they're being bought on these stats and they turned up, have they looked, you don't have to throw anyone under a bus here, but anyone that really stood out that wasn't great when they turned up, but then all of a sudden proved you wrong and proved the rest of the team wrong?
They have had examples of that. They have had examples. And the bit you can never quantify is the fact that in different leagues, it's a very different game to the Premier League. So your stats in the Premier League might not collate or relate to the stats in the Norwegian top division, for instance. And that's where you get that slight discrepancy. I mean, my role in there, so actually I had a big part to play in the goalkeeping situation there, which was good fun. So I then spent a long time going through a lot of the data, and I learned a lot about the goalkeepers in Europe. And interestingly, the 3 goalkeepers I recommended, again, don't mind sharing this, the 3 goalkeepers I recommended to Bristol City were Dan Bentley, Muric, and in fact, who's the first? Samba. So funnily enough, Nottingham Forest signed both Samba and Muric. Muric was given 2 games, didn't do too well. Samba's come and done very well. And obviously they signed Dan Bentley. But the whole process of recruiting Dan Bentley then came down to his distribution. The way that Bristol City play, they're looking for exit routes from goal kicks. So they've almost got it's like a set piece. They've got different movements they do in order to free up the winger or free up the fullback or the man in central midfield or the sitting midfielder. So we needed a goalkeeper that could then be good enough and quick enough with their thought in order to find those exit routes. So I looked at all the different goalkeepers. Dan Bentley was doing it already for Brentford. Now, Dan Bentley had a pretty bad season by his account for Brentford. Now, what that meant was his market value was apparently 6 to 7 million the year before. Well, it suddenly come down to less than half of that. Plus, he only had 1 year left in his contract. So then you talk about value for money. Well, this is a goalkeeper that you could recruit for X, has a good season with Bristol City, which he did and has, and now he could be worth who knows? So this, again, is where the business side of it comes in, which from a personal point of view, I really enjoyed, because then it's looking at the factual evidence. It's then looking at slightly different things outside that. The fact that it had a pretty bad season, I kind of like that, because that then worked in our favour. And I didn't think it was a case that he was a bad goalkeeper, just like we're talking about De Gea or some of these other guys. Look, goalkeepers have a bad period of time from time to time. But if you know they are good goalkeepers and they've got a lot of the basics and they've got a lot of the criteria that you're looking for, then if you put them into a different environment with a top coach, top training environment, a team that suits them, then can we see the best of Dan Bentley again? And I'd argue that we have this season. Certainly on the whole, he's been very good.
So obviously sticking to Bristol City there, though, and Dan Bentley. So Lee Johnson's now moved on. So the style of playing out from the back, looking for the avenues from the keeper, is that a style of play that's set from the top down from the owners, or will a new coach come in and then have their own, tactics they want to apply and then look for their own recruitment?
Yeah, well, this is what it's great. It's a great question. It's interesting because this is where Brentford again pioneers, because Brentford, all the different departments all operate individually but come together collectively. So what it means is if Thomas Franks leaves tomorrow, it'll just be a straight swap. It's not going to be a change of everything. It's not going to be a new physiotherapist or a medical department or fitness department or analytics department, data department. It will just be that Thomas Franks leaves, someone comes in and they play the same football, because that football has been decided from the top down. That is Matt Benham's style of play. It's not Thomas Frank's style of play. It wasn't Dean Thingy's style of play. That
Dean
is from
Smith.
Dean Smith. It is Matt Benham. The great thing for Dean Smith, the great thing for Thomas Franks, you're going to earn a great reputation, because a lot of people will see it as you. Now, your job is to pick the team. Your job is to motivate your group of players and be tactically astute. So don't get me wrong, they're doing a very, very good job. But a lot of what they do is actually from the top down, which is still quite rare, because most of the time a manager comes in and they will have an idea on how football is played. A lot of managers will find it very difficult to move into a model that is already existing and be told you have to play this style of play. And that's, in my opinion, why Brentford recruit the type of manager they do. And again, that's no disrespect to the managers. I think you have to be a very forward-thinking manager, and I think you have to be very open to change and open to suggestion, which obviously Thomas Franks is. But then, if you are and it works, you can gain a lot of plaudits, and you're going to learn a lot. I think others that have that system, I think some have the system whereby they've got their medical department, analytics, etc., etc. But I think most, they will still bring in a manager, still bring in an assistant, still bring in a goalkeeper coach, and then the club will allow them to then dictate the style of play. The problem with that is that the average span of a manager is so short now that if you do that every time, well, then what happens lower down? What happens to your youth system? Do they have a style of play? Do they have to keep changing every time the manager changes? The under 23s? What type of player are you looking for? What's the DNA of a player for that club, of a right back, left back, centre back? Because that can change continually if it's always changing from the top. So again, everyone has different strategies. I think most still go with a strategy that you bring in a manager assistant that they will then be able to dictate how things are done.
Rich, you've teed up nicely there, because something else I wanted to touch upon was obviously going back to preparing for life after football. Obviously, a lot of the coaches working with young, impressionable individuals. Brentford took the decision to close the academy. Obviously, monetary, but also the ethics behind it, in terms of you might have a squad of 15 and only 2 players may make it. So, you know, those 13 that don't, is it ethically right to continue? Any thoughts on that? And any recommendations for those coaches? You already said, you know, if coaches are out there working with players potentially, you know, and there's a keeper that's 5 foot, what have you, and realistically maybe they're not going to make it, what would you be saying to a young player? And a question we had was, you know, if you had 2 bits of advice you could give when you started out, and pass it on to young people, young professionals, what would it be?
Yeah, and look, by the way, this is so tough because, you know, Iniesta was told that he was too small, and he's done all right for himself. You know, so, you know, you've got to be so careful to maybe say to someone, look, this isn't your road, this isn't your dream to fulfill. You know, because I think you can kill a kid's dream. I'd certainly never say that. I suppose it's kind of making them aware that they're doing it with open eyes. If they, because certainly now, look, right or wrong, there is a I don't know how to. I spoke about this recently. It's almost like a gene pool lottery. Like, you know, if you're born and you've got a certain amount of fast twitch fibers and you're going to be 6'4" and really athletic, well, do you know what? You've got a good chance of being an athlete of some description. Whereas if you've got a very different body type, then again, maybe professional sport, being a professional athlete just isn't your calling. You know, and that's just the luck of the draw. You know, I don't think I was necessarily meant to be a goalkeeper. I'm 5'11", although I changed my Wikipedia every other day and kept it at 6'1". But I'm 5'11". I'm allergic to goalkeeper gloves, which is true. Like,
doesn't bode well then.
It doesn't bode well. Like, you know, I had every injury under the sun. Biomechanically, I wasn't right. You know, I think I probably made the most of what I was given. But certainly, you look at some. I use Ben Foster as a great example because he's 6'4", 6'5", doesn't look it because he's so agile, moves so well, and I would argue, and he can boom at 80 yards because he's got this core strength, power, speed. So I would argue that he always would have had a better chance of making it to a higher level than I did, just purely based on what we were given genetically, you know, and that just is what it is. So I'm trying to think where I was going with this, because what was the initial question? Sorry.
Two bits of advice, and we obviously touched upon the Brentford Academy and the balance between, you know, making it and, you know, spending that time on a career potentially elsewhere to fall back on.
Yeah, so what I would say is then, and this is where, rightly or wrongly, there's a good book, and some of you might have read it, called Bounce, and he talks a lot about the 10,000 hours to excellence. Now, some believe it, some don't, but there is an idea that if you are in an exceptional environment, then you've got a much better chance of progressing to a very high level, which, by the way, we're seeing, in fact, we see internationally. Like, there are certain countries that have strong international teams, there are certain countries that don't. Now, why is that? It's because a lot of these places, if you go to Italy, you've got Juventus have an incredible academy. You know, a lot of the top clubs do there. Germany, they've got a brilliant model that they've put in place. You've got 3G pitches all over the place. So coaching lower down is that much better. So again, the odds are you're going to produce more and more players. In England, we've now put this in place, and with Gareth Southgate and everything for the last, you know, 8 to 10 years, we've had a really good model in place. We're seeing a lot of that come through. Man City, Chelsea, unbelievable environments for development. Arsenal over the years, although they've actually just fallen behind Chelsea and Man City now. But again, so this is where it's unfair. It is what it is. But if you're a kid that gets entered into the Man City development, you're a Foden. Well, you know, you've got a fantastic chance. You have the best coaches, the best facilities, the best environment, other players that are fantastic too, that are going to help you raise your game. So, of course, your chance of flourishing in that is going to be so much better. So what do I think about the youth? I understand why Brentford have done what they've done. Brentford's unique because you've got Chelsea nearby, Fulham nearby. So you're always going to get maybe the kids that haven't made it at Chelsea. So there's always going to be an argument, well, are they ever going to be quite to the level? And as you say, you don't want to then recruit 15 kids for your youth team and then release 15 kids a year later, because all you've done is impact their development in terms of their education. So that's not fair. And I do feel there might be, certainly with your Cat 3 clubs, you do wonder whether that's fair on the kids sometimes, if they're not being given the environment and the coaching in order to progress, because all that will happen is they'll do their 2 years and they're just going to be 2 years behind their mates who are now at university, for instance. So, but it's a tough one, because look, if a kid's got a dream, I'd certainly never tell them that that's not for you, because you never know. Some develop at different ages. It's just, for me, about the environment. And that might be you guys as coaches listening in. You might be able to offer that environment for a young player. And if you can, then fantastic. That'll give them the best chance. I still remember my coaches as well, you know, from the age of 12 to 16, who were absolutely instrumental in allowing me to have a career. If it isn't for them, it isn't for my parents turning up and taking me to training every week, you have no chance. So it's very, very much about the environment. If you can find them a Chelsea or a Man City, then of course you're going to give them a great chance. That in itself comes with different pressures as well, by the way, but that does give them a great chance. I think then touching on the life after football, and this is where I suppose it's tough, because I'm looking at it from a professional environment where I'm working with a lot of professionals. When you're working with a lot of, say, kids that are 15, 16, 17, that kind of age where they've got crossroads, do they go down the route and try and make it as a professional footballer? Do they go down the route of education, which can offer them maybe a better job or to start a business or what have you? It's such a tough call, and it's one that the argument will always be, then do you hedge your bets and kind of do a bit of football and a bit of this, but then you might regret not giving everything to football, but then similarly you might regret not giving everything to a business that could have been fantastic. So it's one that I guess I'm not really in a position to answer.
Yeah, a lot of the coaches we spoke to, whether it's Peter Taylor, Eric Steele, it's all about the individual circumstances at that time and you making that judgment, or having people around you, like parents, to give you the advice at the right time rather than push you down a route. It's a real difficult one, and like you say, there's no right, there's no wrong. I thought it was quite refreshing, interesting to hear Chris Wilder. I don't know if you saw his interview the other day when he talks about people down the pub and commenting, saying, "Oh, yeah, Jamie Vardy, that could have been me. I got injured." But he quite frankly said, "Well, no, you didn't get off the deck when you had the knockbacks. You're down the pub for a reason." And it was interesting to hear his perspective, and certainly food for thought, no doubt. But
well, just touching on that, and I think this goes back to what you said earlier about what football teaches you in business. It's not just business, it's life. I mean, let's be honest. I think everyone on this call has probably gone through this. You get knockback after knockback. That's just, doesn't matter what you do. And actually, the most successful people in life find a way of coming through. They find the positives in every knockback. They don't dwell on the negatives for too long. Look, don't get me wrong. We all get knocked from time to time, and some are more difficult than others. But I think that's it. And it depends. And that's what football taught me, in fairness, was, the amount of criticism you get as a goalkeeper. I mean, my God, it's, I sometimes wonder why I recommend it to young kids, but actually I loved it, because I look back now and some of the worst moments I had as a footballer have now set me up in that learning those lessons, having gone through some of those painful moments, you stretch your comfort zones and suddenly it takes a lot more now in order for me to get into a dark place, and that's something that I'm so thankful for. And that's what I'd be looking, and what I do look to instill in younger goalkeepers is more the character. Yeah, they can learn the technique, they can learn being a goalkeeper, but actually more so the character, because if they've got the ability and they've got the attitude, then they've got a chance. And I think if you haven't got the character or the attitude, then you can have all the technique in the world, all the skill in the world, all the talent in the world, but at some point you'll shoot yourself in the foot.
How could you recommend, coaches on the call, how could they help their players in terms of character, mentality? What did you do? I know you've obviously got your degree now in neurolinguistic programming, but did you do anything when you were playing in terms of helping your headspace there?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of books when I played, but it was only kind of in my 20s that I really got to grips with it. And there's a lot of very basic ideas that I suppose I can give, a lot of cliches, like one is there's no such thing as a setback is just a setup for a comeback. The idea that with every mistake, yeah, it hurts. If you make a mistake and you lose a game, it hurts. Don't get me wrong. But what you then need to do is find the positive within that. There's always a positive within everything, even a bad injury. Do you know what? I ruptured my shoulder. I'm out for 9 months. Well, that means now I can work on my fast feet. I can work on my distribution, as an example. If you make a dreadful mistake, then actually that's giving you something you can then learn from and take into your training and into your next game. So I think if you could develop that kind of a mindset where you bounce back, was it bounce back ability? If you've got that bounce back ability, that's huge, because then you will never, ever be beaten by anything. Even the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, you will find a way through it. And it's just, what ends up happening is you just deal with problems quicker. You don't necessarily have less problems, you have more, but you just figure out a way to deal with it. And you almost fail your way to success. In fact, I think there's a book that's even called that, but it does feel, for me, it's felt like that. It feels like a series of failures, but I've ended up in a pretty good position because you keep putting yourself out there, you keep putting yourself up to be shot at, and at some point, hopefully, you learn the lessons and you move forward.
So you did a lot of reading, you're saying, but was there a coach or anyone that stands out that pointed you towards reading these books, or did you just discover it yourself?
So a guy called Keith Mincher was mine. He was at Watford, very, very good. He led me down a path of these kinds of books. I went on a few seminars. Funnily enough, I still speak to him now. So every 2 weeks, I have a mindset session, like for 1 hour. It's a bit different now because there's a lot of the stuff I've learned, but it's one thing learning something and it's another thing putting it into action. And I've really learned that, because it's very easy having all this knowledge and all this information, but if you're not living it, then what's the point? So even now, every 2 weeks, it's more of a conversation I have with it now, 1 hour conversation every 2 weeks, because for me, your mind is a muscle. Your mind is like any other muscle in your body. You want bigger biceps, you do bicep curls. You want to be stronger mentally, you then learn how to deal with things, because we are a system, we are a computer. Going back to Matt Benham, and he will appreciate this, we have similar emotions every day. We have similar thoughts every day. There's a belief that we have 50,000 thoughts a day, 45,000 will be identical tomorrow. We live the same day over and over because that's how we're programmed. So if you want to reprogram yourself, you need to understand your emotions. You need to understand how your thoughts release chemicals, which make you feel a certain way, which make you act a certain way, which then impact your behavior. So then if you've got this information, then you can start to manipulate it. Then you can start to use it, and you can start to change your state. For instance, I know if I'm going to play a game of football, I want to be in an alert but calm state. Well, I've got the ability to get myself in that state. I don't need anybody else to do that. I can think the kind of things I need to think, so I can go through my imagery, my visualization, and I can get myself in that position. So come game time, I have given myself the best chance of success, which again, that applies to everything, whether that's business, whether that's coaching. You can get yourself into the best possible state in order to give yourself the best chance of success.
You said about alert, but also calm. What would you do when the coaches, when working with goalkeepers or any players, to make them calm before a big game?
Sure, I just lost you a bit there. It just broke up a bit. Sorry, could you say that again?
To help them calm down before a big game, to calm the nerves for a big game. What would you do?
Yeah, so different tools again. So when I say tools, it could be, look, breathing. Do you know what? Breathing exercises is one that I used to do. So I'd go into a quiet room. I'd probably have some music playing. I'd be going through the game in my head that I'm about to play and feeling what I would feel during the game. So I'm imagining coming and catching a cross. I'm thinking about playing out from the back, making a great save, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the feelings, because in the same way, well, here's one for you. The unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. What I mean by that, we've all had it. We're about to go to sleep and we imagine falling over and we jump in our sleep. And the reason we jump is because the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind is at play. It doesn't know that we haven't really fallen. It's still feeling those feelings. So that's quite a powerful thing to know, because if you think about something in enough detail, you're sparking off the same things in your mind. So that's a really nice thing to know. So if I'm talking to someone who's got a big game coming up, then I'm working with them on imagery and visualization. I'm getting them to breathe deeply, because normally when we feel tense, we feel nervous. It's because we're breathing is quite shallow. We might be a bit hunched over. We've got tunnel vision. Well, look, open the shoulders, breathe deeply, think about your game, think about the great things you're about to go and do today, tomorrow, whatever it might be. Feel good about it, feel excited about it. You can start to release these chemicals into your body. And by doing so, again, you change your state. By changing your state, you then have a different output. And that's it. You know, you go, what I loved about football, what I hated about football, what I loved about football was the fact that it's the unknown. Look, Brentford should have got a result against Stoke, but they didn't. You know, it's the unknown. 99 times out of 100, they get a result in that game, but they didn't. And that's why we love the game. But for a player, that's also quite scary, because you're going into the game and you could win 5-0 or you could lose 5-0. You could be the biggest embarrassment or you could be the hero. And that can be quite tough to deal with, because there's no script. So because of that, you need to be certain in uncertainty. So this is what I'll work with a lot of the players on, is then understanding your mind, understanding your state, that all you can actually do is give yourself the best chance. How can you give yourself the best chance? You can control the controllables. You can eat the right things, sleep the right things, and think the right things. Do that. Come 3 o'clock on a Saturday, you are as well prepared as you possibly can be. Now it's in the lap of the gods, but you've given yourself a chance.
It's the same sort of traits with football, though, isn't it? Oh, sorry, with business, for example. That's that same mentality, isn't it? The fact that you can only control what you can, put yourself in the best state, be resilient, and different things will happen. No one was expecting COVID to crop up and impact business, but you've got to try and crack on as best you can. I'm just conscious of time, Rich. We've got 10 minutes. I wanted to ask you. So we did have a question actually, because I know Lewis Melville's on the call as well. So he said, were you around when the Brentford Community Trust was launched? That came in.
Yeah, I think back in the day. Yeah, no, it's good to see Louis Melville. Hope he's well. Yeah, I think I was, and I think that from my understanding, again, I haven't been in touch for so long now, so I don't know how it's all going, or if it's still going and what it's doing. But it was fantastic back in the day. Brentford were always, from memory, quite good like that, and obviously Louis had a big a big say in all that kind of stuff, which was huge back then. Again, I've kind of lost touch now, so I don't know how it's going now, but hopefully they're still doing some great stuff.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to ask, and this goes back to when we spoke about Thomas Frank and the Brentford model. If there were players now that wanted to go into management, again, linking it with business, it seems like it's more to do with managing people, like you would in a business environment. Obviously, you've got to know football, you've got to understand the tactics. But like you say, if you're picking up a framework like from Matthew Benham or the Brentford model, you've got to come in, motivate those players. And there's no surprise there when Thomas Frank started slow, maybe makes sense because he was probably then having to understand, the framework himself and how he applies that. But would you be recommending players to, develop personally in terms of their leadership skills and man
100%.
management?
100%. It's a different role. Like it's so funny the amount of ex-players you see that go straight into management, and it's two completely different job descriptions. And it's so where the best ones I've seen. I've worked with Sean Dyche. There you go, great example. He went and did a load of management courses, and then he became youth team manager at Watford. So he did his hard graft early on, and then luck would have it that he then gets the first team gig, and the rest is history. Did brilliantly with them. I don't know how he got sacked, and obviously done brilliantly with Burnley. Malky Mackay. I know he had his problems at Cardiff, but he got promotion to the Premier League. Again, did management courses and went and learned how to be a manager, because it is a completely different job description than it is. The bit that you've got is, having played the game, you will have a certain amount of respect, and you can understand what it feels like to have been a player. So that's the bit you've got. But in terms of having the tactical knowledge, being astute when it comes to knowing when to make substitutions, how to motivate a player, as you say, man management, leadership, how do you communicate with a player, understanding that everyone's different, everyone has different communication styles. Can you tap into each person, know how to motivate them? Some need a kick up the arse, some need an arm around the shoulder. These are things that if you're a player and you go straight into management, it's very, very difficult just to attain. Ordinarily, you do have to do some form of education, whether that's kind of self-development or, like you say, leadership, management. There's a variety of things you can do, but certainly I think if you're a player and that's something you want to do, 100% go and do some courses.
How about yourself, Rich? Management ever interested you?
Do you know what? It hasn't. It hasn't. And I think because I've been so preoccupied and passionate again about goalkeeping, I think that I would struggle as a manager, because this is going to sound bad. I've not got that much interest in what's going on in the outfield. When I watch a game of football, I'm watching the goalkeepers. I just the way I am. So no, I think I wouldn't. Even goalkeeper coaching, though, that hasn't really interested me. More so for the injuries I've had. I think that I would have struggled to have been able to do that every single day. And maybe just working with one guy. I love at the moment that I've kind of got a bit of variety going on. I'm working with a lot of different characters. I'm able to kind of coach them. The stuff that we can probably tell on this call, like I'm talking about the psychological side quite a lot, because you're right, it does appeal or apply in business in the same way that it does in playing. So I like talking to my goalkeepers about that side of things because I'm passionate about it. I know that it helps them. I think this is more my calling, as well as having a bit of variety in different businesses. But the bit that I do on a day-to-day basis is liaising with goalkeeper coaches, offering advice to my players, and I feel that's where I offer the most value.
All right then, Rich. Final question from me: football or business? What do you enjoy more? Or what do you get more pleasure from?
Oh, do you know what? Pros and cons. Like, don't get me wrong, business can't ever replicate the feeling I had against Everton, saving the winning penalty.
I was there. Great day. Yeah. Great night.
Good day. Or playing away at Man City, playing away at Old Trafford, or the FA Cup semi-final. Like, don't get me wrong, I can't get that high when a game's finished. Or that night at Everton, I didn't sleep the whole night. I can't get that. But the bit I like now, do you know, I'm really grateful for the position I find myself in now. I've got some good things going on. I was abroad last week. I'm going abroad again tomorrow. I'm able to work from my phone. People I work with, I've got some really good relationships, business colleagues, and I'm so grateful to be working alongside them. Really good people, and yeah, it's very different now. I feel like there's bits that I miss. Like, of course, I think you're always going to have that, and you're never going to have the major highs. But in terms of the freedom that I have now and the excitement as I'm seeing these different projects grow, I think there is something in that as well. I wake up every day with a buzz for what I'm about to do, and I'm still able to keep myself as fit as I can. I'm playing lots of tennis, playing lots of golf, things that I wasn't maybe able to do as a player. So I guess there's pros and cons to both. But I would say, given that I haven't then wanted to go back and play, I'd have to say that I probably prefer things now.
Yeah, that's good. And going back to obviously the theme, life after professional football, I guess if there are players or coaches listening to this, the fact that it must be hard to walk away from the game. Like, obviously, I was an amateur footballer, so I can't compare it at all. But to have that high and that buzz, to then not have it overnight and think, how am I going to replace it? At least there's some hope, I guess, if people do think, how can they start business ventures and sort of get the same sort of pleasure and enjoyment from it. So it's good to see you as an example for others, really.
No, huge. And I'll probably finish on that. Is that I think the biggest thing and the biggest correlation is that commitment to excellence, and that's probably what I'll leave you with. Is that I think, again, whatever you do, and this is where I go back to business, and the bit that I get a buzz from now is constantly refining a business, and seeing it from stepping out of the business and looking at it and refining it. How can you offer most value to the world? And if you do that, then naturally, financially, you'll do pretty well from it. And it's enjoyable. And when you get the nice comments and everything that comes with it, you will really, really enjoy that. But I think commitment to excellence in terms of personally understanding whatever it is that you're doing, understanding it more than anyone else, and always understanding and appreciating that there's another level. And if you've got that commitment to keep making the next level, then it will continue to grow and you will get massive, massive enjoyment from it.